shouldn't really be the ones who dictate the quality and the standard of our own democracy, rather than always looking up to the US. Who would have ever considered that certain things that are supposed to be sacrosanct in the United States Constitution can be easily toyed with, like giving Trump a third term, no matter how justifiable it appears, because indeed it is true.
Hello, welcome to another amazing video. If this is the first time coming across this channel and you like what happens here, then go ahead and click on that subscribe button. Also turn on your post notification bell so that you get notified whenever we post videos on this channel. On this channel, we do not promote hate speech, we do not promote violence, we only bring credible information that will benefit members of the public. I want to use this opportunity, I want to use this medium to appreciate YouTube for creating such an amazing avenue that helps us bring information, credible information to the members of the public. Now, I came across this video that caught my attention. I want us to watch it together. As you watch, do not forget to like and share.
Less than 5 days after Donald Trump returned to the White House as President of the United States, a Republican Congressman, Andy Ogles, has proposed an amendment to the Constitution that would enable Trump to run for a third term. Trump, like all U.S. presidents, is barred from a third term by the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution, which says no person shall be elected to the office of the president more than twice. As founding father and first President George Washington served 2 terms, the reasoning goes that 2 terms of 4 years each should be enough for any president. Pushing for the proposed amendment, Ogles states, and I quote, "No person shall be elected to the office of the president more than 3 times. Trump returned to the White House on Monday after his first term from 2017 to 2021. Now, Democrats Bill Clinton and Barack Obama both served 2 terms as popular presidents, and many supporters wanted them to serve more, but there was no serious effort to change the rules. Trump has suggested many times that he deserves a third term as a matter of, quote, fairness, arguing that his opponents made his first term less productive than it might have been. Last year, when former President Joe Biden initially sought re-election, many Republicans called him too old at age 81. In November 2028, when the next U.S. election is due to take place, Trump will be 82. Can Trump get a third term and set new record in the history of the oldest democracy in the world? Well, to help us understand the dynamics behind it all, we have joining us in the studio Arise analyst, who's also a lawyer, Frank Tiete, and of course during the program we will be having joining us Adamu Garba, who is an international affairs analyst. Thank you so much, Tiete, for joining us.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Yeah, so Trump is back. What's been your views?
Well, I think it's cataclysmic for international politics, and also a revival of conservative politics in the United States. And nobody saw this coming. Nobody thought it was possible. And in the words of Trump himself, it's the greatest comeback in the history of the world. He didn't even limit it to the history of the United States. And because he thought that, you know, it was a well-deserved win. He won all the 7 swing states, and then he also had won the popular vote. And then he promised, you know, that he would make government to be as simple as promises made and promises kept. And in barely 4 days, and we're in his 5th day of office after his inauguration, he's you know, brought out a gale of executive orders. And some commentators actually said 4 days of Donald Trump in this term actually equal to 4 years of Joe Biden, given the responsive nature to the American problems. And then to think that he had, you know, put his boot together with the, you know, magnificent First Lady Melania Trump to visit North Carolina that Joe Biden couldn't visit, and then so what we have seen is that kind of resurgence of even trying to play that, you know, paternalistic role as America's president, given the way he has even acted in California, despite the fact that he knows that much of his opposition comes from that the Golden State.
But you could see the governor Newsom.
Yeah, but again.
Warmly receiving him despite the political differences.
Acknowledging and, you know, act like a schoolboy, in quotes, saying that we need your help greatly. So I think what this idea of third term, whether I would like it or not, is a reflection of third world kind of politics, you know, because it's only associated with, you know, I don't want to denigrate Africa in any way, but we in Africa here don't really view extension of tenures to be something very, you know, palatable for our politics. We don't like it, irrespective of how much of a messianic, you know, posture that you carry.
Yeah, I mean, Zimbabwe comes to mind because right now President Mnangagwa is actually seeking a third term in that country too.
Yes,
so
and
if
it's
the US
but
is
I think we should
thinking
come
of it,
home
why
first
can't we
because,
think?
You know, we come home because we had a president, and president like no other. I'm talking about General, now Chief Olusegun Obasanjo. You know, because of we're coming from the doldrums of oppressive military regime. So and then he brought a lot of technocrats into government. The Professor Soludo, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, many of them that that thought they needed time to transform Nigeria, and the time was really not enough. And hence, because there were a lot of reforms that were being instituted as at 1999 and all that. So there was some justifiable reason to consider giving Obasanjo a third term, but it was viewed with so much villainous, you know, intentions attached to it that this man simply wants to be a life president,
especially the international community.
Yes,
I mean,
but again, so now think
for that to now be happening
in the US. So
and not just talk about it, but there is a bill that's been introduced.
I mean, it becomes strange. So somehow we want to come back to Africa sometimes and ask ourselves that shouldn't really we be the ones who dictate the quality and the standard of our own democracy, rather than always looking up to the US? Who would have ever considered that certain things that are supposed to be sacrosanct in the United States Constitution can be easily toyed with, like giving Trump a third term, no matter how justifiable it appears, because indeed it is true. If the Russian gate, the Russian investigation against Trump was eventually turned out to be the Russian hoax, which Trump always referred to, and which the likes of his you know, FBI nominee Kash Patel is you know, busted as something that was actually orchestrated from nowhere, and it didn't have a basis, which he dogged Trump all through. It made Trump to lose a lot of legitimacy. He fought a whole lot for legitimacy in his first term, and actually deprived him of all he could do. And then COVID wiped away all of the economic benefits of the policies that he instituted. So no matter how sentimental you may feel, but certain things appear to be cast in stone in the US Constitution.
All right, analyzing the return of US President Donald Trump and some of the policies he's had to put in place, including executive orders, since his return less than a week ago. Well, I still have here with me Arise analyst and lawyer Frank Tite, who's here to help us analyze executive orders and some specific legal instruments, including the plan to give Donald Trump a third term, if that becomes possible. And of course, joining us right now is Adamu Garba, who is a former presidential aspirant under the APC in Nigeria here. And of course, he's an international affairs analyst. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Adamu, let's hear your own views on the plans to actually introduce the third term for Donald Trump. We've had a congressman actually introducing that bill, though it's yet to be considered. I mean, people are likening that to what's happening in Zimbabwe. I mean, who could have ever thought that in the US you could have such?
Yes, the truth of the matter is, if you want to understand the MAGA ideology, you need to look at America as an empire, you know, similar to the way you have the Roman Empire, and then try to imagine Donald Trump as a new king of America, because that's actually the plan. Because if you look at the American institution over time, they have been empire, but they keep ruling through the books. They are people of the book. If your country is going in alignment with their policies, they are fine with you. If it is not, they find all the clandestine way to make sure that it comes back into conformity with their designs. But now you have a president who came on board, who doesn't care about such thing no more. And the country has been run from the back end for so long, producing leaders. But this time around, this guy has systematically undo the entire deep state and then came front as the main person. And he began to chase lands by himself. I want to acquire Greenland. Just look at his statement with the Danish Prime Minister, right? I took over the Mexico Gulf and said that it's now a Gulf of America. I'm trying to take Panama Canal. So when you look at this kind of direction, you will see a new emerging empire that is trying to be run almost in a monarchical terms. So the fact that you have a lot of identitarians now defining the American policy, and they are trying to have a savior mentality, how to save the entire Western civilization from
it's called
collapse.
The white savior complex.
Exactly. So they want to save the entire Western civilization from collapse. They are declining in demography. They are declining in almost all, the development index. When you look at what they used to be 50 years ago to what they used to be now. So they see Trump as a liberator. So they are trying to give him preeminent power. If you notice, he won with majority vote. He had the Congress. He has the Senate all behind him. The entire Supreme Court is behind him. And most of the nominees are his hand-picked people. And almost all of them, if you look at his cabinet composition, none of them is less than $100 million rich. So they have a target. They have a plan. So to me, actually, when you look at the new direction, it's not surprising that the America want to give Trump this preeminent authority to do what he needs to do to restore America to what it's supposed to be. And if you look at the examples of what happened, what they used to give, look at Russia, it came almost to a third world, to a first world country when they have a consistent leadership over time.
Yeah.
Then look at Turkey with President Erdogan. Look at even Germany with Angela Merkel. So they're trying to give these parallels and then say that why don't we have our own version from America to save Western civilization. To me, seriously, it's not a surprising thing to be.
That would be a very interesting thing if we ever had a third term. Though we've had an American president that actually had 4 terms or 4 years actually. But let's talk about the executive orders, Frank Titi. I mean, there's a fear that the executive order, that Trump wants to actually push aside the Constitution and run by executive orders. And so some people have been skeptical about these executive orders. Doesn't the Constitution take care of some of the things that is using executive orders to actually run at the moment?
Executive powers are donated to the president, and he actually needs them to govern the country, to issue policies and directions that will achieve the, the prosperity, the set of progress that is barely needed in the United States at the moment. However, the executive orders must at every time be in conformity with the norms, or with the norms of the Constitution and with the tenets of the Constitution. But the only institution that can determine that is the court. So that's why it's interesting that where there is an executive order that is challenging citizens' birthright, you find that some persons quickly rush to a federal court for the purpose of challenging that order, even though the propriety of that order hasn't been considered within the legal the legal provisions of the Constitution. The judge issued a temporary order and gave something that is more or less preemptive. Gave a statement that was more or less preemptive, that executive order is brazenly challenging the age-old provision of the Constitution. But so that's what it means. Ultimately,
and the states are kicking too.
Yes, yes. But you see, we know what is going on. Trump is trying to redefine the American interest, and certain things that have been too, difficult to be addressed. And many politicians before him that have been politically correct, they've been saying things that they are expected to say are not really challenging the problems head on. He's facing them, and it's making them so simple. And then simply saying, because the citizens' birthright has been one of the major attractions of persons who migrate from all over the world, particularly Europe, to get some form of sanctuary in the United States. And it's simply saying it has been abused. Many American politicians have acknowledged that it has been abused, but none has been able to deal with the issue. Now, even Congress has not been able to consider amending the Constitution. And here is the president saying he's going to exercise his powers. So he's always found a way to use executive orders to circumvent either statutory or constitutional hindrances. For example, building the wall. When it was difficult for him to get Congress to release money, he simply went another way to either issue emergency powers or look at certain monies that under the Ministry of Defense for the purpose of building the wall. So I think Trump knows that he's running on an emergency time and that he needs to do things. And then we might be experiencing a situation that is close to our own here, where the presupposition is that court orders in the United States will always be obeyed. But one of the problems for our own democracy in Nigeria is that the government obeys court orders at its convenience. So he does what he wants to do, and then the notion of go to court and let's see what even happens. There are orders that court orders that are not obeyed. So there is a danger that the U.S. might be faced with a president that wants to say, let me do what I want to do first, and then let's see what the courts will say.
And just before I come to Adamu Garba, let's talk about some of those states that actually kick in against the president. I mean, you see like Chicago, they will say, look, when it comes to this, we are not going to support you. But Trump is saying that, what he's saying is that ICE, I mean, the immigration authorities, would have to enforce those federal laws. So where is the place of state policing and federal policing when it comes to the deportation of citizens in obedience to this executive order?
I think immigration falls under the federal jurisdiction, and that's why the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Department, is geared to be responsible for deporting persons that are called illegals in the first place. But here it is. At this time, citizens' birthright is still very much in place, and what they are kicking against is that what about persons who traveled intentionally, purposefully to the United States to give birth to their children so that they automatically becomes U.S. citizens? That's what Trump is targeting. That's what's saying he's stopping. So, and he is addressing it because he believes it has been abused, and he believes that it's ripping the United States of its resources in taking care of the real citizens of the United States. And I'm proud many Nigerians have actually, exploited that opportunity to become U.S. citizens. There's something about being a U.S. American citizen. It's usually we thought that it was only an African thing. We thought it was only a Nigerian thing. But the U.S. citizenship appears to be so lucrative that people do everything possible to get it. And so you can see the border crisis in the United States, Mexican border, and you see the breach and all that. How people are pouring in, not necessarily because of economic crisis in their own zones, but there's this, seemingly different kind of lifestyle just within a border, of Mexico and the United States. The transformative, different landscape in terms of political landscape, freedom, the liberty to become, as different from the oppressive on the other side. So the idea is that prosperity comes from the liberty and freedom, and to a large extent the exaltation of law above every other person that operates in the United States. That has been the key for the prosperity of the United States, and that's why everybody wants to be a citizen. Not necessarily according to what Trump thinks, that it's simply because it's an economic destination. All
right, Adamu, let's talk about some of these executive orders. One of them is to pause aid to different parts of the world. So the US right now is holding back to its money and saying that, look, we won't give aid to some countries except some countries like Israel, like Egypt, and all of that. Talk to us about some of these executive orders with specifics as to that, and of course the citizenship rights too.
I think, to me, this is a gift to third world country, a situation whereby aids are stopped. And I like what the vice president said in Davos when he was asked about that. He said, I would rather carry my poverty with dignity, but I will need to discuss with you on equal terms. Let us discuss business. Let us discuss what is in for you, what is in for me. I don't want to sit here, you give me aid from the right hand and then you take it by the left, through other, policy adjustments and some misconfigurations that will end up being, in the large extent, right, detrimental to the interests of my country. So I believe stopping foreign aid at this stage is very critical, and I like the fact that his entire focus is going to be on diplomacy with strength. As he said, he's going to focus on energy dominance, which is also very critical to us in Africa, especially in Nigeria, where we play very big in the Gulf of Guinea, right? And if you look at why he has to stay with Egypt, and then why he has to stay with Israel, and to some degree with Ukraine, is to continue to sustain the engine that protect their energy interests in the Middle East, because the Middle East now have almost a triangle where you have the HTS under the control of Turkey, under Muslim Brotherhood, that took over Syria. And then you now have the Saudi Arabia-led conservatives, which has Egypt at its backbone. Then you now have the Israel angle. So all those kind of angles are the angles where he has to play, and that's why for him to weaken the HTS, because I don't believe Trump is in with the game in Syria. So he will want to strengthen Egypt, because Egypt is threatened by the same forces that undo the Syrian government. And the same forces, incidentally, are the ones that are playing currently in Sudan. Because if you look at the divide between the two generals, one of them is supported by the Turkish, Qatari, side, which is Muslim Brotherhood, while the other side is being supported by the Saudi Egypt. And that's how they do to exploit, of course, the resources of Sudan. And this has opportunity also to boomerang into our own continent, where you keep having this kind of divide. So Trump is going to pay critical attention to the energy that we play in, the way we exploit it, and American interests ultimately. And of course, we know that when they come to Africa, their principal issue is with France. You know, America has a Cold War with France. People can see that they are NATO members, but in Africa, they're actually competitors. So we will have to find a way to navigate this by enacting our policies that will enable productivity, that will substantiate value in the international stage, so that Trump himself will now see reason why he will transact with Africa on equal terms than when we just succumb to the whims of the foreign aid that seems to, of course, evacuate a lot of resources from our economy from the back end.
All right. I want you to talk about Trump's foreign policy and how the world views him, including some of the domestic politicians. John Bolton, former security advisor, actually said when it comes to foreign policy that Trump is very weak, and most times he goes to meetings, he hardly listens to people. It's what he wants that he pushes out. That was what he said in his first term. And now we're seeing Trump returning, even withdrawing his security and all of that. Do you think there could be a different Trump? Could Trump have learned some things while he was, out 4 years ago? Could there be a different Trump when it comes to foreign policy, the world, and of course dealing with Africa?
The truth of the matter is Trump is an ultra-nationalist. He is 100% anti-globalist. People like John Bolton are 100% globalist. So they are completely in tangent with each other when it comes to foreign policy view. And Trump is voted for in office to protect the interests of the ultra-nationalism. And that is what he's going to pursue. So if he's stepping his foot in any other country, it has to do with interests of America first agenda. And that's why if you look at the direction of Marco Rubio, immediately he was sworn in. The first meeting he had was with the countries within the AUKUS, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and then to some degree India, to contain China, which is their number one priority. The second priority is to protect the dollar at all costs, because dollar now is actually the pillar of American civilization. If dollar dies, America is gone. And that is why you see he went frontally against the BRICS, the emerging BRICS nations. And to the point whereby he was even alleging Spain is a member of BRICS, even though Spain has never applied to join BRICS, but he's calling it BRICS because he is going to fight to make sure that he maintains dollar supremacy in the international trading system. And this is where we come in as Africa, or as the global south. It means that we have a very big opportunity to ride on the global south alliance of the BRICS, so that we can advance the interests of our own commodities, of our own kind of currencies. We don't necessarily have to always depend on the dollar to be able to transact with India, for instance, that buy more of our oil, or with China that we import more from. So we will have to find a way to trade with our local currency so that we can strengthen our economy. So that can be a very excellent diplomatic negotiating asset within our basket. We are now, especially we in Nigeria now, we are partners of the BRICS. We can advance this alliance. It's a very coherent and responsible strategy to do that.
Well,
and that is
become a partner nation now.
Yes, so we become a partner nation. So that could help us to always negotiate in defending so many of our interests if they want a compromise, like Egypt did. Egypt joined BRICS. IMF quickly joined to rescue Egypt because they want to make sure that they maintain Egypt within that belt, the largest Arab countries. So we are the largest nation, kind of the most populous country in Africa, and then we also are, of course, the largest economy when you look at in PPP terms.
Well,
so we have
we're about doing rebasing, though the statistics now don't favor us as the largest economy on the continent, but
in PPP terms, in PPP terms we are, because if you look at the fiscal policies that have been implemented by the government, it may sound very hard now, right? And then, but again, when you look at how it's going, we are now defining ourselves in real terms, not in arbitrary terms, not in heavily kind of inflated, subsidized terms that we used to be. Right. So I believe this kind of fiscal policies can only be successful when we align with Global South Alliance, so that they can come for us when we need them, not an American alliance that have a supremacist president who wants to only push the interests of his country first.
All right, just before we go on this short break, Frank Tete, I want you to speak on that too. I mean, that view by John Bolton of President Trump during his first time, saying that, look, he hardly thinks so much, he hardly reads so much. When it comes to foreign policy, he's very, very, lackadaisical about it. I mean, and that really earned John Bolton some big stick from Trump, including now he has had to withdraw his security.
No, not quite. There was a report where Trump was alleged to have said that Bolton was a warmonger, that he caused all the wars in Iraq and misled the presidents at all time with regards to the decisions of the wars, and that he too also appointed Bolton to give it as a negotiation gimmick, to give the impression to the world that he's got a warmonger behind him and that he was ready to bomb.
Like a decoy.
But deep down within him, he disliked Bolton and disliked the politics of Bolton, and he didn't mince words in his second coming by denigrating him with the signal of withdrawing his security. The idea is, you see, Trump comes with the strength of being a negotiator, and that he has his own rules of negotiation, and that making very wild statements like making Canada the 51st state of the United States, or with the intention of taking back the Panama Canal, which to a large extent he has legal grounds to do, because of his allegations that when it was actually ceded, wholly built by the Americans, and within a territory around Panama that was actually at that time referred to as an American territory, and that so long as his allegation that the Chinese are operating it and they are overbilling American ships in terms of tariffs, and he was going to take it over, and then his intention to actually go ahead and buy Greenland for strategic military reasons. So all of these are, tactics of negotiation according to his own rules. So the idea is that Bolton comes from that conservative end of where diplomacy is often filled with making statements that are not intended to be carried out. But Trump is a straightforward talking president. He means whatever he says. And in that case, they will be at parallel ends, at different ends of the whole thing. So, but at the moment, Trump is redefining global diplomacy, and with his the last address he gave at Davos, there is
we're coming to it on the second part. President Donald Trump and his return to power continues to dominate international discourse. Since his election victory in November, Trump has not been able to get Russian leader Vladimir Putin to agree to talks to end the war in Ukraine. So he's turning to Saudi Arabia for help. During a January 23 speech to the global business elite gathered at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, Trump called on Saudi Arabia and its allies in OPEC to ramp up oil output, a move that will push down crude prices, choking a key revenue source for Moscow to fund its war. During his 2024 presidential campaign, Trump made ending Russia's 3-year full-scale invasion of Ukraine a priority and has been seeking to set up a meeting with Putin since winning election in November. But the Kremlin has seemingly refrained from entering talks, with analysts saying Putin believes he is winning the war and thus sees no reason to stop the fighting. A day after he was inaugurated as president on January 20th, Trump said he would impose more sanctions on Russia to get it to the table without saying what exactly he will target. He reiterated the warning the next day, but the Kremlin is not flinching. Under Trump's predecessor, Joe Biden, the United States imposed sweeping sanctions on Russia's economy, including its oil industry. Russia's economy is heavily dependent on the export of oil, which accounts for more than 30% of its federal budget revenue. A decline in either Russian oil exports or the oil price would further strain the country's already troubled economy. And we still have our guest in the studio right here, international affairs analyst Adamu Garba, who is also a former presidential aspirant on the platform of Nigeria's governing All Progressives Congress, APC, is still here. He's a friend of the house. And of course, lawyer and Arise analyst Frank Tietie, who's our own, is right here with us. So let's talk about oil politics and Trump's statement in Davos. What do you foresee, especially his hit back at Russia, asking Putin to see how things can be measured up, or else he'll throw, sanctions?
Yes, the truth of the matter is European interests around Trump, those that are lobbying, especially the Italian Prime Minister Meloni, they were insisting that Ukraine, even if the war is going to stop, then Ukraine will have to come as a whole. So that's what they are kind of negotiating with Trump. And that's what Trump is forcing Vladimir Putin to come on board so that Ukraine can completely be remaining as Ukraine within the borders. And Russia felt like they have spent so much in blood and treasure, and for that reason, they have now earned the right to take 30% of Ukrainian land. So that is why Vladimir Putin is non-committal until these terms are agreed, because they have laid it down to President Trump. In fact, they mentioned it on many of their statements if you look at what is coming from Washington and Kremlin. But then, the oil politics is going to hurt Moscow, as you said, when the sanction is imposed. But already you have like 18,000 different sanctions against Moscow. Yet Russia emerged to become the largest economy in Europe. So Russia is not only driven by kind of oil economy, it's also a war economy country. So the more you have war in Ukraine, the more Russia makes more money.
Yeah, I mean, where's OPEC in all of this?
Yes, exactly. No, Russia is not part of OPEC.
Yeah.
Right?
But
so,
of course, if there are any sanctions against Russia, of course,
yes,
it will have impact on the global oil prices.
Yes. So now, if you look at the largest global consumers of oil, you talk about China, you talk about India. China has a 20-year agreement with Russia regarding oil supply, and the trade volume between China and Russia is even done within their local currencies. I think last year, at the first 9 months of last year, they traded almost $141 billion in local currencies. Then you saw also the agreement between Russia and India, right? Almost 10 years agreement that continuous supply of oil. So these are the biggest off-takers of the global oil today. About 33% of global oil demand passed through the Strait of Malacca, and majority of that oil ends up in China, and some of them also goes to India. So when you look at this kind of dynamics, I hardly see how this sanction is going to work, because already Russia is selling the oil below, market price.
Yeah.
So what kind of sanction? Maybe the sanction will be around the dollars, but a lot of mechanisms and instrumentation were created to bypass the United States dollar over this period of time. So I believe Trump is going to push hard. But that at the same time also give us opportunity with the oil producers in Africa, especially in Nigeria. Thank God I saw that the president has already started conciliating Ogoniland. So we will now have massive oil production in that area. This, when conciliated, we have about 150,000 kind of barrels addition to our supply. And our supply has now increased drastically. So it gives us a leverage. It gives us an opportunity to go towards the OPEC alliance with Saudi Arabia to see how we can also protect more and get more, while at the same time discussing with our BRICS partners like India and China to find a way to trade with them in their local currencies. So while we get more dollars than we need, we also reduce the pressure on dollar by dealing very well with India and China, our largest exporter and our largest importer. So I think that is to us in Africa, if we truly play our game very well, we stand a chance of kind of growing our economy much more beyond what we have planned, because I believe people like Trump being the president is actually a great gift for Africa, because there will be non-interference.
Yeah, and Tete, let's talk about this oil politics, especially domestically in the U.S. I mean, the outgoing president says, look, no more oil exploration, and Trump comes in and says, look, we are going to explore all oil wherever it is found, inland, off-land basin, and all of that. Talk to us about offshore drilling and how the Trump presidency is trying to say that, look, we have to look at things from a different perspective.
Yes, and so it challenges the paradigm of, global warming and the threats of fossil fuels. Trump appears to have actually thrown all of that, aside, and then, preaching this drill baby drill approach to energy security of the United States. What Mr. Garba referred to with regards to the strength of Russia despite the myriad of sanctions, which is an acknowledgement that the sanctions failed, is what Trump referred to the fact that he was going to turn to Saudi Arabia. There's a reason, because actually those sanctions didn't hurt Russia, because Russia kept on selling its oil constantly, steadily to India. Yeah. But actually, ultimately, Russia was still supplying the oil to the EU states, even with higher prices that they would have sold before the Ukrainian war.
That's what Victor Orban, was saying.
So Trump has realized that it's not really about the sanctions. When you find out that the refineries are in India and Russia still keeps selling crude, finding a way to sell crude oil to India, and then India refines the crude oil products and sells them to the EU, so and it makes Russia to be richer, and then the war would definitely continue. So definitely, Trump was right to have identified Saudi Arabia as the ace, because Saudi Arabia leads OPEC. So if Saudi Arabia acknowledges that it can indeed bring down the price of oil, and then when the drill baby drill begins to yield any form of returns, and then you can expect that energy prices will be stable and probably lower. But one would wonder, how would Trump achieve that with Saudi Arabia? Is this, we just give a kind of a fiat to Saudi Arabia, an issue, and order Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia will obey? But do not also forget that Saudi Arabia relies heavily in terms of military support from the United States, and that becomes,
and Trump has always been their darling,
and then that also becomes the negotiation point by which Trump can actually coerce the Saudi Arabian authorities to fall in line in terms of reducing oil prices. And if that is done, that will be a fast way of bringing Putin to the table. But understanding the Putin's macho man's mentality, you wouldn't have expected that Putin would have easily told or agreed to talking to Trump in this first week of his presidency. That would have been too predictable of a guy like Putin.
Yeah.
So I expect he will bow. But when it comes to the, in terms of the internal security, national security, energy security of the United States, nothing can be better. That's, seemingly the best news that manufacturers have heard in the United States, and then the revival of industries, and then the massive, use of, tariff threats as an incentive to bring massive investments in the United States. Yeah. Nothing can be more impressive than the Massa son of SoftBank coming back to Trump after pledging $100 billion to now increase it to $500 billion in order to show up AI infrastructure. Yeah. So the idea is that he's attracting investment to the US with the kind of mentality that he's removing all sorts of bureaucratic barriers, all sort of red tapeism, so that you can many of these companies that are coming can also build their own power plants. And by also getting involved in making coal a very veritable alternative. And I mean, that's really bold in an age where countries are signing off from fossil fuels, and Trump is encouraging foreigners to come and invest in the United States and even make use of coal if the traditional sources, if the nuclear sources don't are not enough.
All right, gentlemen, what's the need for Africa in Trump's presidency? Let's start with you, Adamu Garba.
Yes, I think what is the need for Africa is nothing other than what they can present on the table. Because if you look at Trump's speeches from the time he started campaigning till when he became the president, there was no single mention of Africa.
Yeah, many people were saying and sharing on WhatsApp, the African presidents were not invited to his inauguration, this and all of that. I mean, this guy is looking inwards.
Yeah, so what Africa has on the table is what Trump will use to deal with Africa. But what Africa fails to provide on the table, then the Trumpist, the MAGA foreign policy strategy will come and confiscate it by force from Africa.
Do you see Marco Rubio as being someone who can actually deal with the world better, especially Africa, in terms of re-engagement, being the Secretary of State?
If you look at the recent policy he rolled out, by assuming in the State Department, attacking the DEIA policies and so many other things, and configuring the foreign policy. Of course, their target is just China, energy, and dollar. Now, Africa is a pivotal player in China because we are one of the largest, in fact, we are the largest trading partner with China, nearly $165 billion annually with China. Then also energy, right? We are also one of the largest energy exporters. Then dollar. Many of us are, bigger countries are now aligning against the dollar alignment. So we expect them to come to Africa full time, but they will come with strength. There will be no kind of corner arrangement that you can see with the leftist Democrats. These guys are coming practical. Give us this or we take it by force. So if Africans are not properly prepared, if our internal institutions are not strengthened, if we did not come back home and enact policy to protect ultimately the interests of Africa for African growth, then we will always be subjected. In fact, they will recolonize us. Because if you look at the mindset of the MAGA, empire, the mindset is the reenactment of the 19th century colonial empire.
An expansionist agenda.
Exactly, expansionist agenda. So they confiscate our land and take everything by force.
And I want to hear your view on that.
I beg to differ a bit, because let's see, Africa has always been there to be exploited. by especially European interests. The Americans haven't had that approach, apart from the fact that they were interested in various regime change in the past because of, the expansion of the principles and the culture of democracy, and then to also protect their interests in the days of the Cold War. But we don't see a U.S. that is interested in, making policies for the purpose of targeting African resources, except for the containment of China. And in that case, we might just be witnessing, a U.S. that might be aligning with certain African leaders, and then in opposition to others. But let me say this on a lighter note. Donald Trump is very much well liked in Nigeria and a whole lot of African countries. And you know the reason? The reason is that... what do you think? No. The reason I think, for me, and we can interrogate it, is that, Donald Trump is what very many Africans want as a leader. In terms of, there were times we
strongman politics.
Yes, because there were times we were venerating institutional strength for Africa. But it turned out that the institutions however strong, however traditionalist they may be, will not guarantee good governance and then fulfill the yearnings and aspirations of the people if you don't have men who are committed to the people. And so you see, the average African is actually having this sentimental, no wish that somebody like Trump is his president who actually promises and then he keeps what he promises, and that he's not out there to take the resources of state and then to either feather his nest or that of his friends or cronies. So the African is yearning for a messiah to be in politics, to be in political governance, and that's what they don't have. But apart from that, given the fact that the history has always shown Africa to be an underdog, which we do not really see a Trumpist, movement that will see Africa in that light. In that case, let Africa adopt this negotiation mentality, because they will have a president in the United States who prides himself as a chief negotiator. So what does Africa have to offer at this time? What does Nigeria have to offer to the US? And when we think in that direction, we can now think that this Trump presidency can be beneficial. So there's a lot more certainty and predictability with Trump than the Democrat leadership that has all caused more problems for us, whether what we had in Libya and across the rest of Africa.
All right, as we try to coast home, Madam, let's talk about some of the policies that we've been seeing, and of course the need to renegotiate some of these deals. Now let's talk about how some of the politicians in the US are even scared of Trump. Now the Democrats have already hired psychologists to educate them, especially in the Congress, as to how they can deal with Trump because of the policies that are coming abruptly. How should African leaders be taking a look at Trump? For example, when it comes to the mass deportation, what should we be doing? And then when it comes to security, for example, Pete Hegseth, who is the new defense secretary, it took, due to internal politics, just one vote from the vice president for him to scale through. It looks like Trump is going to withdraw and not, be expansionist when it comes to security in African countries. And there are some places in Africa that have been secured by the US. So if there's a withdrawal policy, there will be fears from some of these countries that it may affect their internal security. How should we approach these new arrangements by Trump? Thinking of America first, but yet we need America in certain areas to help.
Yes, I think what we need to do is to look at Africa first. Maybe let's say by country, let's look at Nigeria first. How do we do to strengthen our internal political, security and economic systems? That's the only thing an African leader can successfully do to help in navigating away from the kind of Trump mindset in the leadership of the United States. A situation whereby we have internal conflict, like the way we have banditry, kidnapping, all those things, and several other African countries where you have violence of terrorism and co and co. We must deploy and develop a mechanism that will conciliate these issues so that they can't be exploited. That is the only way. So once we strengthen our internal mechanism, we become strong, we become Africa first thinking, then we will have a kind of very strong respect from the American Trump era, whereby they believe America first and they have something they believe they have on the table to offer in advancing their interests within your country. So you also have to believe in your own country first and define policies that will give you things in your basket.
Yeah, on the issues of mass deportation and all of that.
Yes.
How should African leaders be approaching that?
I see that's very positive because we have so many intellectuals in the US that are helping to develop the United States economy. Yes, of course, we have some institutional gaps and challenges policies that makes them not to be comfortable to operate in our continent, in Africa, for instance, Nigeria. Some of the most intelligent people running the United States today, especially within the political and economic perspective, are Nigerians. So if the deportation affect them, we have positives. They are coming back to Nigeria to develop our economy.
Okay,
so I think it's a very good one that if you are not doing the right thing and you have the capacity, you come home and build our home, because we need your services more than to evacuate all the intellect, the capacity, the knowledge, the competency you have for the development of another man's land. Since he said that that is his land, you come to your land too and build your land.
Okay, Frank, I mean, how do we renegotiate these policies?
The United States is structured in such a way to attract the best from all the countries of the world, and then to also now relegate the worst from all the countries of the world back to wherever they came from. That's the idea. So most of all of these persons Mr. Adamu is referring to as intellectuals have found a way to be absorbed into the American system, either being given permanent residency or citizenship. But what Trump is looking at is the dregs of the society, not the dregs of the American society, because he keeps referring to rapists, to persons that were brought from mental institutions and prisons from Venezuela and from Puerto Rico, from Colombia, and then maybe Mexico, and they're being brought to the US. And so those are the persons he's targeting first. And so you will
of
be
course,
surprised.
Africans will be affected when it comes to that deportation.
You see, the demographics of what Nigerians are doing in the US, tend to show that we are some of the most accepted persons in the United States, like the Indians. So that should really be a problem to Africa, because we're also thinking about how much they really don't want the Haitians, because the Haitians are very close to the United States, and they think that the invasion actually came from Mexico, from Latin America, and from Haiti. And they're not, it's not an ordinary African that is able to travel from Nigeria and one way or the other gets his way into the United States and remains as an illegal. Nigerians are smarter than that. We're not going to see much of that as a problem for us in Nigeria here. I do not see a mass deportation of Nigerians here, because they have many Nigerians in the United States, either because they have the highest ranking in terms of those having the college degrees, and they're with the best of skills. So we're not expecting those ones to be deported. Unfortunately, we in Nigeria, we are going to experience more legal migrations from Nigeria to the United States under Trump.
Very interesting perspective indeed. It's a very tough time, especially for American politicians. Those ones that are the Democrats, for example, I find it very tough dealing with Trump and his return and all of that. But in a nutshell, just before I let you guys go, when you hear of a congressman submitting a bill for a third term for Donald Trump, do you think that's actually possible? I mean, just within us.
Frankly speaking, I think it's possible. That's why, in fact, in the beginning of the interview, I told you that it's not surprising at all, because Trump defeated the Democrats and the globalist institution both politically and morally. That's why you see they are turning to psychologists to kind of guide them, because they can't understand why the Americans 100% submit to him.
I think it's okay. I don't think it's possible.
You don't foresee that.
But see, it serves a poetic, value with this bill. What do I mean? I mean, it sounds an alarm. For just 5 days into his presidency, and someone is saying, give him third term. It's trying to say that, look, these are the best days for America, and let's watch out for it, to the extent that we wish this man should have a third term. But practically, America will lose its place as the leader of the free world,
if that does happen.
Democracy, if that happens. That's tending too much to be African than American.
Well, I would love that, Jah. Such a very fine place to leave this conversation.
Thank you so much for watching, and please drop your contribution, drop your opinion in the comment section. Please do it constructively. You know what I mean by that. And do not forget, if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that. Like this video and also share. I'll see you in our next video.